Put on your headphones. Turn off every distraction. And for the next few minutes, listen as if your future self is reminding you why you can't keep letting comfort make your decisions for you. Let's begin. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a Roman emperor sat down and wrote himself a private note about not wanting to get out of bed. He wasn't writing it for an audience. He wasn't building a brand around discipline. He was arguing with himself in the cold, the same argument almost everyone has at least once a week. And what he wrote down next has almost nothing in common with what gets sold as morning discipline today. That gap between the original argument and what gets marketed from it today is worth examining closely, because most of what survived was the hour, and almost none of what survived was the actual reasoning underneath it. Tonight, what he actually knew about mornings and why most of what gets copied from him misses the entire point. Principle 1. He wasn't naturally built for this. He talked himself into it every single time, using the same argument. The version of him people picture is stoic and immovable, immune to the pull of a warm bed. The actual man argued with himself in writing, admitting outright how much he wanted to stay wrapped up in blankets a little longer. There was no discipline gene making it automatic for him. There was a rehearsed argument he returned to every morning because the resistance itself never stopped showing up. This matters because it removes the excuse that mornings are only hard for people without whatever trait the disciplined seem to have. They aren't naturally immune to the pull. They've simply built a response to it that doesn't depend on the pull disappearing first. This is worth repeating because it's so easily lost in translation. The writing itself is evidence against the myth it gets used to support. A person with effortless natural discipline wouldn't need to argue himself out of bed in his own private notes, repeatedly, across years. The argument existing at all is proof the resistance was real and constant, not a sign of weakness, simply a sign of being human, in exactly the way anyone reading this 2,000 years later still is. Principle 2. His argument wasn't about willpower. It was about reminding himself specifically what he was for. He didn't talk himself out of bed by gritting his teeth. He talked himself out of bed by asking a pointed question, whether he was made to lie under blankets and stay warm, or made to do the work only he was positioned to do that day. The question wasn't about motivation. It was about identity, asked at the exact moment comfort was making its case. This is a completely different mechanism than most morning advice offers. Most of it tries to make getting up feel good. His approach didn't require it to feel good at all. It simply made staying in bed a smaller, less coherent choice than the one it was being weighed against. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. Advice that depends on the task. Feeling good eventually fails because feelings are inconsistent by nature, and some mornings simply won't produce one. Advice built on a question of identity doesn't depend on feeling anything in particular. It only depends on being willing to ask the question honestly, which is available on the worst mornings exactly as much as the best ones. Notice, too, that the question was short, not a paragraph of self-persuasion, a single pointed sentence aimed directly at the choice being made. Long arguments give resistance more surface area to negotiate with. A short one doesn't leave much room for the negotiation to begin. Principle 3. The actual point was never the early hour. It was refusing to let comfort set the terms of the day before anything else got a vote. Waking up early is only useful because it's usually the first moment comfort tries to negotiate. Stay a little longer. It's still dark. Nothing urgent is happening yet. Winning that first negotiation matters less because of the hour on the clock and more because of what it establishes. That comfort doesn't automatically get to decide what happens next, today or any other day. Someone who wakes up at 9 but still refuses to let comfort dictate the rest of their choices has learned the actual lesson. Someone who wakes up at 5 and then spends the day negotiating with every other form of resistance has copied the hour and missed the principle entirely. This is why two people can wake up at the exact same time and be practicing entirely different things. One has simply relocated their negotiation with comfort to a different hour, still losing it just as often, just earlier in the day. The other has actually won the negotiation itself, and the early hour is just where that win happened to become visible first. Principle 4. Modern morning culture turned the wake-up time itself into the achievement and lost the actual mechanism underneath it. Somewhere along the way, I woke up at 5 became the entire story. Posted, tracked, treated as proof of character on its own. But the hour was never the point for the man who actually wrote about this. The point was the internal argument that got him there, an argument that has to be rebuilt fresh every single day, regardless of what time it happens to end at. This is why so many 5 a.m. club attempts collapse within a few weeks. They copied the visible output, the hour, without rebuilding the actual mechanism that produced it, which was never about the clock at all. An hour on a clock is easy to copy and impossible to sustain on its own, because it isn't actually the load-bearing part of the original practice. The argument underneath it is the load-bearing part, and arguments have to be rebuilt personally. Nobody can hand you a finished version of the exact reasons you specifically need to hear at 5 in the morning. Principle 5. The transferable lesson isn't the hour. It's identifying your own version of the cold morning argument and rehearsing your answer to it in advance. Everyone has a specific moment where comfort makes its case first. For some, it's the bed. For others, it's the first hard task of the day, the first difficult conversation, the first task they'd rather postpone. That moment is your version of the cold room, and it arrives whether or not you've prepared anything to say back to it. The people who handle it consistently aren't relying on willpower showing up fresh each time. They've already had the argument in advance, enough times that the answer is ready before the resistance even finishes making its case. This is the part that actually transfers across 2,000 years without needing any adjustment. The argument has to be specific to you, rehearsed before the moment it's needed, and returned to deliberately rather than improvised under pressure. Nobody wins that argument by accident, repeatedly, for years. They win it because they built the same answer in advance and simply retrieved it on schedule. None of this is about waking up earlier for its own sake or treating exhaustion as a badge of honor. He never suggested either. It's about recognizing that every single day contains one early moment where comfort tries to set the terms first. And whoever wins that one moment tends to keep winning the ones that follow it. So tomorrow, in whatever form your own cold room takes, don't wait to feel like winning that argument. The feeling was never going to arrive first. It never did for him either, and he's the one who wrote the argument down in the first place. Have the answer ready before comfort finishes asking the question.